Hello, friends. Welcome to our weekly members only Q&A. Thanks so much for joining me. If you are watching this and you are not a Pack-A-Day member, get this from time to time. That means that you are watching this after the fact. Once it is done, once the initial Q&A is over, I put it live for everyone. So if you'd like to get in on the action in the future, become a member and you can actually come and join and ask the questions live. But it is open to everyone once it is over. So that is why you are seeing it, even if you are not a member. But if you are a member, first of all, thank you. And secondly, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. I see we've got a bunch in the chat already. I'm going to change up the... There we go. Get a little logo in there, get the username on there, and we're good to go. So let's get into our conversation right away. Have about till 2:45. Then I do have the Bleacher Report live stream right away at 3 o'clock. So if you, some reason, need even more Andy, you can come at 3 p.m. Central Time live in the Bleacher Report chat and continue to ask questions there as well. So I will get to as many questions as I can right now. And then, like I said, give me about 15 minutes and I'll hop over to Bleacher Report 1 and we'll be over there live as well. Brandon Danielson, happy snow day, Andy. I just saw that Chris Banjo is the special teams coordinator for the Jets. What an amazing opportunity for him. Who is your bold prediction major offseason acquisition for Green Bay? It is really cool for Brandon Danielson. I absolutely, or sorry, oh, that's amazing. For Chris Banjo, sorry, Brandon Danielson. That's amazing for Chris Banjo. I love that for him. Really, really cool opportunity for him to get to be a special teams coordinator. He was one of the ones that Green Bay probably let go a little bit too early. And, you know, it was at a time where Green Bay really just did not value special teams players. And we've seen definitely a change in philosophy. It hasn't totally resulted in a much better special teams, although it's been slightly better. And I think that would have been at a time where if they had the same philosophy that they had now, I think Chris Banjo would have been a special teamer in Green Bay for a lot longer. You know, at the time, it was basically Ted Thompson and company, and even in the early Brian Gutekunst years, were, hey, those 51st, 52nd, 53rd spots, those aren't for Chris Banjo. They're not for Dallin Levitt. They're not for, you know, Corey Ballantyne or whomever, you know, whatever special teams player you want to insert, right? Zane Anderson. It was for a up and coming Alex Light, Raven Green, Yash Nyman, Tim Boyle. We can go on and on. It was for a developmental player who was basically a redshirt player. And Green Bay still has those from time to time. Certainly, you can look at Travis Glover to some extent as an example of that. Jacob Monk this past season, guys that basically weren't going to play that were redshirt players. But for the most part, they've done a better job of keeping those special teams players around now. I think if Chris Banjo had been a Packer in this era, I think he would have stuck around as a Packer a bit longer. Probably should have. Probably was a mistake for Green Bay, but definitely a cool opportunity for him. As far as my bold prediction for a major offseason acquisition, my not so bold prediction is that they're going to make a bold move in some capacity. Who that is, what position they play, those could go in a variety of different directions. I think a Khalil Mack is in play. I do believe that they will be in conversations if guys like Max Crosby and Myles Garrett become available via trade. I think they'll be involved somewhat in the wide receiver market, although that one's a little bit tougher for me to sort of gauge. I'll take it one step further. I think it's going to be a pass rusher. It's hard to pinpoint the exact corner that they would sort of go all in on. It's hard to pinpoint an offensive lineman. I can't really find a wide receiver that makes a ton of sense, although I do think Devontae does make some sense. But I'm going to say that it's a pass rusher. Milton Williams, it could be. Osa Digizua. You know, it could be something, again, a Josh Sweat. It's going to be, I think, a significant pass rush acquisition. So who that is, I'm not sure. I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say Milton Williams, or actually, maybe I will go Osa Digizua. I'm going to say Osa Digizua because I think they're going to want somebody. I think Milton Williams might be a little bit too one-dimensional for their tastes. I think they're going to want somebody that defends the run a little bit better. Milton Williams, Khalil Mack are all, you know, Mack might be a little bit too old. So I'll say maybe an Osa Digizua, someone like that, maybe a Josh Sweat, but I think they do go and get a significant pass rush and defensive line upgrade for this team. So a little bit of a cop-out, but I think somebody in that realm makes a ton of sense for Green Bay. With the Packers already having a full roster, can the Packers add picks beyond the 8 that they have, or are they constrained by the number of players they already have on their roster? Well, that depends. It's a really great question to kind of look at, Jim, and I haven't done this yet, so we're going to do it out loud together. Like, who are players that are pretty well set to make the 53-man roster, right? No additions, no draft picks, no free agents yet. Just roster as is. Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins. Well, I can't say Josh Myers. I'm going to still say Jacob Monk, Sean Ryan, Jordan Morgan, Zach Tom. I still think Travis Glover, especially based on him getting time last year. Kraft, Musgrave, Love, Willis. We're up to 15. Josh Jacobs is 16. Marshawn Lloyd. I'm going to say Emmanuel Wilson or Chris Brooks. At least one of them will go to 18. Gary and Van Ness gets you to 20. Devontae Wyatt, 21. Clark, 22. Brooks, 23. And Igbare, 24. Cox, 25. Hopper, 26. Walker, 27. Cooper, 28. Valentine, 29. McKinney, 30. I'm going to still say Zane Anderson, 31. Evan Williams, 32. Oladapo, 33. Nixon, 34. Bullard, 35. Whalen, 36. A kicker, 37. Hopefully McManus. Orzik, 38. 38. I think 38 players are pretty well, in some capacity, locked into spots. So everything else is sort of up for grabs. Let's say they sign 3 free agents. That brings you to 41. That's still 12 guys. And, there's going to be some injuries as well. So you can absolutely, like if they drafted 12 guys, they could probably find a way to get those 12 guys on the roster. I don't know that that's necessarily the direction that you want to go. I mean, and that would obviously be the number that we are at. I don't know. I think Malik Heath, Bo Melton, you can add additional players onto that, of course. And I think they have good players ready for those spots, but I think there's ways that you can get those guys on the roster and not have it be a total waste, right? So I think they can gather more picks if they want them. I'm not sure that that's the direction they should or that they need to go in, but I also don't think they're at a spot where it's like, well, they've got 60 guys already that are going to make a 53. So adding any guy is just a complete, waste of a spot. I don't think it's quite that, but it's just going to be good competition. And you never hate that either. But I'll say they can absolutely add more picks if they want them. But I think most people, myself included, would be more inclined to basically say, hey, let's add premium players rather than just quality over quantity, right? Quality over quantity. Good point, Jim, which is why I'm not opposed to utilizing some of those picks and going out for a Crosby if that becomes a possibility, or Garrett. The question is how many? Well stated. Also been out on the last couple times because of some work stuff, but I've never got to comment on Justice's proposed trade to get Garrett. Totally out on trading away Willis, best backup since Flynn, and not ready to give up on Watson yet with how young he is and how healthy he looked until his ankle got freak wrapped on. I think the one's on accident there. So let me just say this. If you're doing a Myles Garrett trade and for some reason the Browns were like, we want Christian Watson or we want Malik Willis, I'll just say I don't think either of those things would be deal breakers. I also don't think they're going to be enough to move the needle. I don't think Watson does really anything for anyone in that situation. The Browns are not competing next year, and to get 5 games of Christian Watson under contract, I don't think that particularly does anything for them. So it doesn't add any value to the trade. I would not see him as being a piece of that deal. Malik Willis, I've talked about this in the past. You'd have to have the team that's trading for him value him somewhere around a top 100 pick. So how you have to view it if you're Green Bay is Malik Willis is going to test the free agency market in 2026. He's probably not going to want to stick around and be a backup behind Jordan Love. He's going to want an opportunity to go and compete to start somewhere. Where that is remains to be seen, right? But it probably is somewhere where he wants to have that opportunity. So if you're Green Bay, you have to view it as that you have one more year of Malik Willis left. That's it. Probably all you're going to get. He's a great backup, no question about it. But your hope is that through the course of that 1 year, he doesn't play anyway. You don't actually want to see him on the field. Now, if you need him, he's an unbelievable break glass in case of emergency quarterback to have, right? No question about it. So to me, that Mendoza line is a top 100 pick. If it's anything below a top 100 pick, I think you just say, now we're good. Buzz off. We're just going to keep our backup quarterback for a year. Maybe he signs somewhere. Maybe we get a 6th or 7th round compensatory selection out of it. We'll be fine with that. I think that's probably the direction. If Cleveland would say, we value him as a top 100 pick, and it's like basically getting a 2nd or 3rd round pick out of it, then I would say, by all means, go for it. I don't think you can pass up something to that extent for Malik Willis for 1 year where you're hoping that he doesn't play. If you can sign him to an extension, if you can keep him around longer, be very open to having those conversations. I think that'd be a great opportunity for Green Bay to explore that. But if you're thinking that he's only going to be here for a year, in a year where you hope he doesn't play anyway, you can go out and sign a veteran backup for a year and you can get that top 100 pick value out of him. But if it's not a top 100 pick value, then you just hold on to him. And that's, again, why you don't see a ton of player for player trades. The odds that the team trading him and the team that's trading for him see eye to eye on what that value is, especially from an NFL standpoint, is pretty rare. So if I'm looking at a Myles Garrett trade or, something like that, I still think it's much more likely that the comp is something like a first, a conditional second, and LVN, something to that extent. I think that probably makes the most sense. You get a developmental defensive end, position for position. They lose out on Garrett, but they get somebody in who has talent to take that spot. And then you get a first round pick this year and a conditional second next year, where if Myles Garrett goes on to play like an all-pro, that would turn into a first round pick next year as well. I think that type of deal makes a lot more sense. Do you think they could do something similar with the Rasul trade where they use Jair to move a pick up a round or two instead of just getting an extra pick later in the draft? Yeah, I think that could be something that you do. But I just, again, what's the trade value on a 6th round pick, right? You're probably talking about, in that situation, let's say he gets traded to, I don't know, Seattle. I don't even know that makes a ton of sense, but let's say it's Seattle. Seattle picks ahead of you in the 5th round. You're probably swapping 5th round picks to move up, 10, 15 picks, something like that. So Jair in or maybe Jair in a 6th for a 5th rounder, something like that. That's what I think you'd probably be looking at. I don't think it's going to move the needle all that much. Again, if you listen to the show today, I think his trade value is somewhere between a 6th and 7th round pick at best. I think it's still probably slightly more likely that you get nothing in return for him. So yeah, listen, if you can move up in the 7th round, if you can get a conditional 2027 7th round pick for Jair, like if you can get anything, man, squeeze all the juice you can get out of that lemon by all means. But I wouldn't expect a ton going into this offseason, but it could be something that they certainly try if they do get to a team that is actually interested in trading for him. For example, moving a 4th and Jair for a 3rd. Correct. Yeah, gotcha. Feels like that would be the better way to utilize Jair because we need more premium players and not a quantity of depth pieces. Totally fair. Also out on DK, Debo, DJ Reed, Byron Murphy, etc. After the Super Bowl, I'm a little bit more in on Williams or Sweat, but probably more on Sweat. Metcalf, I'm fine with. I just don't see Green Bay being interested in him as much as it would need to be to probably get his services. Debo's interesting, but he doesn't move the needle a ton for me, although I haven't watched the tape yet on Debo. My plan right now is to watch Debo and Cooper Kupp today for the episode tomorrow. DJ Reed, we walked through. I just don't think it's going to be worth the price. Byron Murphy, I don't think is going to be worth the price. Williams and Sweat, I do think actually make a good deal of sense. Godwin, I just don't think is the receiver that they need. He's a good wide receiver. I wouldn't say no to it. Slightly aging, coming off he's already had ACL, MCL, busted ankle, not a speed demon, not somebody that's going to be a super game breaker within the offense. I would probably say pass on that as well, especially when, again, you're looking at an exorbitant contract for his services. We can go up to 90 players. According to Spotrac, we have 60 on the roster. If we don't have more draft picks, we can sign more as undrafted free agents. So yeah, I think what he was looking at was, the ultimate 53. So yeah, they can have 90 men on the roster right now, but it doesn't really matter if you've got 90 men on the roster when you got to get down to 53 by the end of the year, right? Or by the start of the year, I should say. So if you have 90 players that are capable of making the 53, that's great up until the point where you have to make your 53. And then those other 37 players just get claimed by other teams and you don't get anything in return for them anyway. So that's sort of the point, is there's a law of diminishing returns at some point. Once you get to, X amount of players on your team that are 53-man roster capable, adding more to that on the bottom side just doesn't make a ton of sense. Then it starts more consolidating resources to get players that can be better on the top of your roster rather than, again, guys that can be somewhere between 40 to 53 on your roster. Let's see. You always want to fill out 90-man rosters, but it does feel like we're closer to a full 53 than some years have passed. Gotcha. That's what we're talking about, of course. Happy Wednesday, Andy. I'm all booked for Steelers game in Ireland. Saw rumor in December that opponent could be Packers, but planning to go either way. Maybe Aaron will be the Steelers. I didn't even think of that. I didn't even think of that second part. I have my hotel booked for Ireland in case it does happen. Didn't book the flight yet, just being a little bit extra cautious there in case there's rumors back and forth that it may be Green Bay, may not be Green Bay. I do have a hotel booked in case it happens. I haven't booked the flight yet, but as soon as we get word that it's official, we'll be booking the flight as well. And my plan will be to attend Ireland. So, Mike, maybe I will see you there. As long as it's not the Vikings, I'm just imagining a horror scenario where Rodgers goes to Minnesota with Devontae. Then you have Tay and JJ on the outside, Hawkinson and tight end, and Jonesy at running back. Hey, you're not even adding Jordan Addison in that situation. So yeah, it would be an interesting situation. I've said that all along. I don't think it's super impossible. If you sort of look at the potential timeline here, right? The biggest hurdle for me would be does Minnesota want to get in the Aaron Rodgers business? I don't think I would if I was Minnesota. I think I would probably want to go in a different direction. But that aside, you can pretty easily get to a conclusion where Sam Darnold wants to get a 4 or 5 year deal, this offseason, or a big, at least multi-year contract with some team. That a 1 year deal with Minnesota while they continue to groom JJ McCarthy is not what he wants. And if he wants that, he has to probably go outside of Minnesota. So that could lead to Sam Darnold leaving. And if you're Minnesota, you're looking at the roster right now and you're saying, we've got a team that's ready to compete potentially for a Super Bowl at the moment. Do we really want to risk that with a first-time starting quarterback that is coming off a significant knee injury? Maybe we give him that 1 more year. And if so, then you're looking for somebody who can win now, and you start canvassing the league for who's available, unless they're the ones that make that trade for Matthew Stafford, which I'm not sure they're going to want to give up that draft capital for. Maybe they do just sign Aaron Rodgers for 1 year. Say, hey, let's give this a go for a year. You're probably going to get hurt at some point. JJ McCarthy will get some opportunity to play during that. But in the meantime, we are going to give you the keys to the castle. I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. But I really don't think it's impossible. And then you do get in that scenario where, do they add a Devontae Adams? Do they bring back Aaron Jones in that situation? Do you have Rodgers and Jonesy in the backfield, Hawkinson at tight end, a wide receiver core of Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, and Devontae Adams? I'll pass on that with Brian Flores' defense. I'll pass on that if I'm a Packers fan. I'm good. I don't need to see that. Now, maybe you build all of that up just to have the prophecy once again be fulfilled, and Aaron Rodgers play the role of Brett Favre, and this is not Detroit, man. This is the Super Bowl, and a big mistake in an NFC championship game that cost them the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, and everything collapses from there. And then a little while later, Jordan Love ends up winning a Super Bowl like Aaron Rodgers did. Hey, if that all comes to fruition, I guess all is well that ends well. But I think I'll pass on that if I'm a Packers fan. But I don't think it's entirely impossible. Just probably not likely. Let's see. As long as it's not the Vikings. Oh yeah, we went through that. Sorry. Got to ride with McCarthy, right? I think so. And he was looking really good in preseason and in training camp last year. I think that's probably the move, but they're going to bring in a veteran. Maybe it's just a Daniel Jones. Maybe it's somebody else, but that's going to be a really interesting scenario in Minnesota. Interesting to me that the Vikings and the Bears have the same Super Bowl odds, plus 3,500. It's a very weird situation for me. I don't get that one, but Vegas knows more than I do, I guess. Excuse me. Other horror would be Rodgers and Tay going to San Fran. I don't see that happening. I mean, you'd have to have like a situation where some team trades for like Matthew Stafford, the Rams trade for Brock Purdy. Like, let's say the Giants trade for Stafford, Rams trade for Purdy, 49ers pick up Rodgers. Like, even then, it just seems too far-fetched. I think Purdy will stay the quarterback in San Francisco. I can see 30 to 35 with Jobs, and the rest. Yeah, we went right over that, Mike McGee. We were right on the same wavelength. When is the next big day in the NFL? Cuts, trades, bidding. When does that stuff start? Well, cuts can happen at any time. So Chuks Okorafor, the Patriots offensive tackle, was already released. So teams can start releasing players at any time that they want to make cap casualties or whatever. That just kind of trickles through from now until the rest of the season, basically. The start of like the free agency period is, I believe, like it's not the very first of March. But I can get it for you. 1 second here. So February 18th is the date that teams can designate franchise or transition players. You've got the scouting combine from the 24th through the 3rd. Teams must designate franchise or transition players by the 4th. And then March 10th is when the negotiation period begins for free agency. And that's when you start getting all the leaks of, or right away, team so-and-so has agreed to a future contract with yada, yada. So March 10th is basically the start of free agency, but you can release players starting now. And then you do get into a portion of free agency, right? For example, if the Packers cut Jair Alexander today, tomorrow, or even today, any team in the NFL could pick him up. They don't have to wait till free agency. You can immediately start signing players. You can also start agreeing to trades right now. If Matthew Stafford got traded to the Giants, they can agree upon that trade. They can't make it until the new league year begins, but we've seen this happen in the past before. I believe the Deshaun Kaiser, Demarius Randall trade was an example of that, where the trade was agreed upon by both parties and we knew what the trade was going to be. And then it just took until we actually got to the start of the league year where everyone could announce it. But you do see trades start to be agreed upon at this point in time. But March 10th is the big date, the start of free agency. But releases, signings, and agreed upon trades can happen starting now. So we're in the off season for sure. Would picking up Dahlman and acquiring Garrett plus Adams be enough to push this team to the next level at the cost of having maybe one premium pick in the next 2 drafts, Andy? Probably a bit too much there. Could they theoretically probably get that done? Yes. I think Myles Garrett's contract at about $35 million per year is going to pretty much tap them of anything else that they're going to be able to do. If they go something like that, I do think they could probably bring in one more piece. I think you're probably looking more towards like a mid-tier corner, something like a Rasul Douglas or something like that, more than a Devontae Adams. I think that's probably a little bit too much, and you're probably way too much going over budget to go and get a starting caliber center and maybe one of the best offensive linemen in free agency, Andrew Dahlman as well. So that's probably too much, too fast, too far. It hopefully would put them over because they're probably not going to be able to do that much, and they're going to have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. So hopefully that would put them over the top, but I think I don't see a scenario where they're getting three players that caliber, at least when one of them is Myles Garrett. Is our young wide receiver room growth being stunted because they don't have a veteran helping them like Jennings, Nelson, and Adams did? I don't necessarily think it's that. It was really nice when you had that lineage though, right? There was always somebody ready to step up and be that number 1 wide receiver. You knew it before it happened, right? In fact, you basically had to release Jordy Nelson to get, Aaron to finally start looking at Devontae Adams more. And they haven't had that. I don't think it helps that they haven't had that player to kind of lead the way and to kind of continue that lineage. But I also think that there's a huge opportunity there with getting more snaps for players. If you were to ask me, is it better to have a veteran receiver in the room for a young wide receiver? Would I rather have them a veteran wide receiver in the room, or would I rather let them get more playing time and learn out on the field? I think the playing time is usually the better thing to get them quickly acclimated to the NFL. But it hasn't helped. I'll say that much. And it would have been nice if they had that guy that was ready to step up and ready to go right away and be that mentor in the room. They just didn't. We'll see if they remedy that this offseason, maybe put that player in place so that they can kind of start that clock over. Then hopefully Jaden Reed becomes that guy, or Dontavian Wicks becomes that guy. And then you can kind of start that entire succession plan over. But certainly has not helped that they haven't been in that position. I'll say that much. Matt Patricia, who looks completely unrecognizable to Ohio State for the defensive coordinator job, replacing Jim Knowles. I did see that. Interesting hire for them. It's Ohio State. I'm sure it'll work out. If you had to bet $100 on it, where does Aaron Rodgers play in 2025? I'd say Pittsburgh. That's where I would say it. There's just not a ton that makes sense, right? You start putting the breadcrumbs together a little bit too. And with Pittsburgh, there's not, like, if they're literally moving on from Fields and Wilson, which has been the rumor, they're not in a position to draft somebody. I don't think they're going to be in the Sam Darnold sort of sweepstakes. That doesn't seem totally like what they would do. Maybe that could be it. And then you just start like, where do they go from there? The only other player that kind of makes sense is Aaron Rodgers. Like, they're a sort of win now team. They consistently play super well on defense. They're ready to win right now on defense. They've got good playmakers. I don't know it's a complete offense, but maybe it's Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams package that comes with it. That's the only one that kind of makes sense to me. It's just going to take one team to say, Aaron, we're all in with you. We want you to be the guy. I don't know if Pittsburgh gives him that full autonomy and all the everything that he wants, but if I were betting today, I would probably put it on Pittsburgh. What's good, Andy? One of the positives of bringing someone in like Tay would be mentoring young players, demonstrating what it takes to operate at that level. Is that a real benefit or way overstated? Yeah, kind of like we just talked about in that question earlier. I definitely think it's a benefit. I don't know. I don't think you're going to get Tay in the room and all of a sudden you're going to see Wicks and Reed and everyone just be like, oh, that's how we play wide receiver. Like, and then they just take off, right? But do I think it helps? Yeah, absolutely. Do I think seeing Tay put in the time, effort, and energy, the attention to detail, the artistry in his craft, like all those things, do I think that's going to wear off on some of the younger wide receivers? Absolutely. So absolutely that helps. So I think it helps, but I think it's not going to be this like transformational event where all of a sudden Tay's in the room and now you've got a bunch of mini Tays because he's in the room. Doesn't hurt, but I don't think it's going to be transformational either. I'll put it that way. Is this young roster already past the mentoring phase? No, I don't think so. I think most of these guys, 24, 25, 23, I think they're still, even if it's not like quote unquote mentoring phase, right? We don't even need to necessarily put it in that terms. I don't think we're to the point where Devontae's going to have his, arm around, Dontavian Wicks and being like, here's what we're doing and like things like that. I don't think it's going to be something exactly like that. I think it's going to be more leading by example and just seeing how Devontae goes about the day-to-day business. And then, of course, just having somebody that you can ask questions of like, why did you release that way? How did you get off the line with that step and get the corner to do this? Like, I can never get the corner to do this. How did you get him to do this and manipulate him in that way? Like, just those conversations through osmosis, through seeing it every day, the attention to detail, the practice habits. I think all of that is more of a leadership by example than a quote unquote arm over the shoulder mentoring sort of relationship. I don't think that's Tay. I mean, it might be to some extent, but I don't think Tay is going to come in and be like, hello, my fellow pupils, like come join today for Tay 101. And what can I teach you about my wide receiver skills? I think it's going to be more, again, through just watching him and just, asking questions and things like that. Who's Jordan Love's personal quarterback coach that he works with in the offseason? I don't remember the name off the top of my head. Steve Calhoun. Yeah, that's his offseason QB coach. So Steve Calhoun, been his quarterback coach since 8th grade, I guess. I think that's who it still is. Yeah, pretty sure. So I think it's Steve Calhoun. Would you be in the realm of trading LVN and Clark plus draft picks for Garrett? So again, you have to look at what the value would be. This is not towards you, Sergeant Dan. I love you, my friend. But the name Kenny Clark holds weight in like the water cooler conversations of like, all right, let's give up a first round pick plus Jair Alexander plus Kenny Clark plus all of this stuff. And it like you start building up this, ammunition box of stuff, right? And you're like, look at all this stuff we're willing to give you. But you have to look at the reality of it. If you're trading Jair Alexander, again, it's probably for a 6th or 7th round pick at best. Kenny Clark doesn't really have any trade value. He's an almost 30 plus defensive tackle who played his worst season last year, who's in a really bad contract. And teams want like the tradable assets are young, controllable, talented, stars that you haven't had to pay big money to yet. Though that's where the money is. That's where the value is in trades. Kenny Clark and Jair Alexander might wash out to actually not having any value in a trade together because you don't want to take on either of those contracts. If you said to the Browns, we will give you a first round pick, LVN, or let's just put it this way, 2 first round picks, LVN, Kenny Clark, and Jair Alexander for Myles Garrett. Or you said, we'll give you 2 first round picks and LVN for Myles Garrett. It's the same thing. There's no difference in those 2 trade packages. In fact, I actually think that there is probably a world in which Cleveland says, no, you hold on to Jair and Kenny. We're good. What are we going to do with that? We're not competing. We're doing this to get younger and more young, talented players and to probably tank for a couple of years and acquire young assets. The hell is Kenny Clark and Jair Alexander going to do for us other than sap our salary cap? By the way, if they trade Myles Garrett, they don't have any salary cap space left. None, 0, zip. Like they are going to be this close to it for the entirety of the season. So not only do they have no value in that, they cannot take on Jair Alexander and or Kenny Clark. So not only do they not have value, Not only does Cleveland have no regard for either of those players, they couldn't even take them on if they wanted to. So it sounds good on paper. It sounds good at the water cooler. Oh, we'll give you a first and a second and LVN and Kenny Clark and Jair Alexander. And like, you're sounding like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of stuff. But actually, it hurts the trade probably more than it helps it, if I'm being honest. All right. Do you think the Pack would be interested in picking up Mike Green in the draft? Let me start by saying I haven't studied him a ton yet. I did watch a little bit of him. I think we did it live right here on a members chat, if I remember correctly, or at least one of our chats. He's explosive. He's fun. He's athletic. What I'm interested in, if they do go with Mike Green, it's going to be a bit of a change in philosophy for what they've liked at that defensive end position. But we've never seen Goody acquire a defensive end in the Jeff Hafley era. We've only seen him acquire defensive ends in the Mike Pettin or Joe Barry eras. What Jeff Hafley likes might be a bit different than what Mike Pettin and Joe Barry did. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is a little bit different. So my guess is still probably a little bit outside of their ideal defensive end. But if they really like him, Jeff Hafley says, hey, this is the exact kind of guy that I like. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think we're also might be getting to a point where the more likelihood that Mike Green is available at pick 23 might be getting less and less by the day as well. Although don't quote me on that again, not fully ingrained into draft stuff quite yet. Not for including Clark with that trade. Again, include him all you want. It's not going to matter. So again, there's no trade value for Kenny Clark at this point. We could do another episode on that as our next one if we want. Kenny Clark for the trading team. 2025. Yeah. So he's got a roster bonus coming up. He's going to have it's like a $9 million contract for him this year, a $20 million deal for him next year, $20 million deal for him after that. That's not, and no team's going to want that contract. I mean, now it's non-guaranteed and it's not super exorbitant in year one. I just think if you're asking most teams, especially like you have to look at, this is one of the deepest defensive tackle draft classes in a long, long time. I think DJ said he's got something like 24 starting caliber defensive tackles in this draft, something crazy like that. And then you've got a really great defensive tackle free agent class as well. Nobody's trading crap for Kenny Clark. Sorry, it's just unequivocally true. So you can throw him in all you want. It's just, again, it's not going to affect anything one way or the other. Just feels like everyone following the club closely is all set on Kenny. Feels a little quick to give up on a guy that is 29 and was injured last year. Call me an optimist. Still think 97 can play. Two different conversations entirely. Kenny being able to help Green Bay in 2025, I agree with. I think 2024 was a down year. I think he's going to be better in year two in Jeff Hafley's defense. And my guess is he grades in the positive next year and is a overall value add for the team, even if nowhere near what the contract would say it should value it at. I think he's going to probably underperform the contract, but I think he'll help Green Bay in 2025. I do. I don't think you're necessarily pining to get rid of Kenny Clark. The different conversation is that no team is also pining to take on that contract. So there's no trade value for him, but I don't think Green Bay is looking to release him or get off of it or anything like that. There's no real added value right now in doing so. He'll be a Green Bay Packer. He'll help them in 2025. It's going to be nowhere near what they're paying him for, but it'll still be beneficial to some extent, more than it would be cutting him. And again, you're not going to get anything for him in a trade. So he'll be here. I expect him to be better and hopefully has a great year in 2025. I think he really can. Is it possible that the Packers can move on from Clark and Gary this offseason? Possible, sure. Anything's possible. If they post June 1st cut Kenny, they would save $10 million on the cap this year. They would have a cap hit next year. Then still, it's not worth it. You'd be basically paying Kenny an additional $6 million, $6.5 million to not play for you this year. You're going to pay some of it later, but you're basically paying him $6.5 million more to not play for you and then be free of his contract next year. Just never going to happen. Never, ever, ever going to happen. So he'll be back. And again, nobody's trading for him. So he's going to be a Packer. Rashawn Gary, you're going to break even on his contract. So you save technically $160K. If you post June 1st him, you would actually save up to $17 million on this year's cap. Just ultimately at the end of the day, Would you rather have Rashawn Gary for 25 million or not have Rashawn Gary for 25 million? Like, he's too talented and too good and still too important to this team to just cut him outright or to trade him either. I don't think there's going to be a ton of, like, I think Green Bay's going to value him more than any team trading for him would. So I don't see that happening either. I do think he would have some trade value, unlike Kenny and Jair. So I think he would have some trade value, but just really, really don't see Green Bay going in that direction. But if you wanted to move on from Clark and Gary this offseason, you absolutely could. Don't think that there is any chance of that happening, and don't think it would be the right move to do either. All right, what's the thing that gives you the most hope and pessimism heading into next year about Green Bay leading into the offseason? One second. Hope and pessimism. I mean, my hope is that I really like the core of this team. I think they're talented. I think they have the ability to take a step forward. And I think they're going to add some significant pieces. And I love the urgency statement from Brian Gutekunst. Let's get everyone on the same page, focused on the right direction. It is time to win championships. I think that they can compete with anyone. I think they need to take a look in the mirror from a coaching standpoint of some of the things that didn't work on offense last year and how they can fix that. I think they need to look in the mirror from a player's perspective and figure out why so many players took a step back last year and not many took a step forward. Same thing from a coaching perspective. And I think the GM in front office has to take a hard look at why their ROI on first round picks has not been good enough. Why, when they're taking these premium selections, are they not getting premium results? I think there's things that they have to look at internally as to why they're not getting the overarching results that you would want from a lot of these areas. Again, the improvement from players internally, the offense maybe, again, kind of clunking out at the end of the year and not getting ROI on those top picks. I think those are the things that they need to improve, but I love the core of the team. I think they're going to be ultra aggressive in improving this roster this offseason. And I think they have a puncher's chance to go out and win against anybody. I really do. More than that, like, they can beat anyone on any given day. So that's what I'm optimistic about. Pessimistic is a couple things. I'm not pessimistic about it, but I'm definitely a bit more, not concerned. Concern's the wrong word, but I think this is a really important year for Jordan. Like, if we just see the same 2024 season in 2025, it's going to be more probably like, okay, that's just who he is, which is not that you can't win with that, but it certainly makes it harder. And it makes it that you have to put all the right pieces around him in order to really make it successful. And then also hope that he has kind of an Eli Manning postseason where he just goes nuclear at some point, which he can do. He gets very hot at certain times and just doesn't turn the ball over in the postseason, because we know those turnovers are killers. So I don't think that's going to be the case, by the way. I think that there is a version of that 2023 end of year Jordan Love that's out there. I think he can do it consistently, and I think he can sustain that success, but we kind of need to see it. And we haven't quite seen that yet for a full year. And this kind of feels like the year where he needs to put it all together to show, I'm that guy. So not pessimistic about it, but more just realistic of, like, this might be the prove it year. And I just hope he proves it. So again, not pessimistic about it, optimistic about it, but I'm also realistic about it. And then just wanting to see if this coaching staff can get these young players to the level that they should be at. I haven't seen enough overall improvement with these young players over the course of the last 2 seasons. Everything for this organization should have been about taking this young core of 22, 23, 24-year-olds and making sure that they were their absolute best at 25, 26, 27. It should have been 2-3 years of focused progression on the fundamentals, on all of the technical traits and all the technical skills. You got the talent. You got the dudes. Now make them into stars. And it's felt like they've focused more on winning and trying to win here and now, week to week, than it's been put into all of the minutia and details that go into getting yourself ready for the 2025, 2026, 2027 seasons, where this whole core should be in the prime of their careers. But they've got an offseason to attack it. I do think last offseason they attacked it aggressively and really did a lot of individual and drill work to try to work on that stuff. We just didn't see the improvement from it. So pessimistic, I want to see actual improvement from the young guys on this team. Realistic, this is a huge year for Jordan Love. optimistic, love the core of the team, think they're going to be super aggressive in addressing some of the needs. And I think they're going to have that sense of urgency to go out and try to win this thing. So I think I can see it in all three ways. Let's see. Yep. All right. We went over that. If you could have any of these three players have a third-year breakout where they have a 95th percentile performance in their range of outcomes next year, who do you choose? Wicks, LVN, or Valentine? LVN. LVN without even thinking about it. Pass rush is just so important. And imagine they do go out and get a Milton Williams, right? Or somebody like that. Let's say they add a Milton Williams. And now you've got Milton Williams, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, and a 95th percentile LVN. Holy shit. Like, you are so far cooking with gas at that point. That's going to be a really fun defense. Wicks would definitely help. Getting another really great wide receiver in there certainly helps the offense. I have faith in this offense to figure it out. Almost no matter what, they'll find ways to put up points. And then Valentine, getting a really nice corner would be good, but you're never taking the great corner over the great pass rusher. And LVN has so much juicy traits to go along with that. It's an LVN answer, 100%. No question about it. That Kaiser for Randall trade was one that really didn't work out for anybody. Sometimes that's how trades work. Sometimes that's very much how trades work, especially when you're talking about change of scenery guys and, some late round draft picks. More often, those are the ones that just don't really benefit anyone. And you're just hoping upon hope that Demarius Randall can go somewhere, revitalize his career, and that Deshaun Kaiser can go somewhere, revitalize his career. And it just didn't really happen for either. Sometimes it just happens that way. How much do you think Matt could be useful as a mentor to our edge room? I feel like he's a freak athlete, profile matches Gary and LVN, and he could really help them improve their technique. That one I think would legitimately help. Again, we're past the mentor point for Rashawn Gary and things like that. But it not only do I think it just helps, again, lead by example, have that guy in the room, but I do also think just adding another guy like that just sort of resets the structure. Instead of Rashawn Gary having to be your one, he goes to your two. Instead of LVN or one of those guys having to be the two, he's the three. Instead of Enigbari needing to be the three, he's the four. Instead of Brian Cox needing to be the four, he's the five. I think it just sort of resets that structure a little bit and makes it a little bit more attainable for what it probably should be. So I think the veteran, in the room, some tricks of the trade, leading by example, resetting that room, less pressure on Rashawn Gary, less double teams on Rashawn Gary, all those sort of things. I think it helps everyone. So again, I don't know how much of a, arm over the shoulder mentor we're looking at here, but I'll say it once again, I certainly don't think it hurts in any real way. All right. I do have to get out of here in a couple minutes to get prepped for that Bleach report, but I'll go through the rest of the chats quick here. If Rodgers does go to Pittsburgh, where does Wilson go? Does Fields stay as a developmental backup? There's been rumors that Fields has a market out there. Who that is, I don't know, but my expectation as of right now, maybe the Raiders, I don't know, but that he gets a deal somewhere. I could see Fields or Wilson with the Raiders with, go back with Pete Carroll. We'll see if that's something that could happen there with Russell. I don't know. Maybe that one's a little bit far-fetched, but I think both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields will get opportunities to potentially start, or at least, compete somewhere. I'm not really a Gary person. I'm signing Mac, drafting a first-round pass rusher, and if Gary isn't on pace for a 10-sack season, I'm trading him. All right. I think if you're in that position, I'm falling apart live on camera. I think if you get to that point, again, having Rashawn Gary as a secondary or tertiary pass rusher is a great place to be in. So if you do get somebody like let's just pie this guy, like Myles Garrett, and you still get a pass rusher in, maybe a defensive tackle that is rushing the passer well. To me, Rashawn Gary is going to be a hell of a number 2, number 3, number 4 pass rusher along that defensive line. To me, that's more of a good thing to have than a bad thing. But, if you want to trade him and you get something good in return, I'll go for it. But to me, I think you're probably better off keeping him in that situation and building something a little bit more special along that defensive front. Remember, it also took Jordy Tay Jones a couple of years to get going. Absolutely. Saw a video from Cheesehead TV where they said it makes more sense to use their first on a defensive tackle because if you take a defensive end, you kind of punt on LVN. I do not totally agree with that. I think we see Philly all the time just say, keep taking pass rushers. Keep taking pass rushers over and over and over. It doesn't matter where you get them, how you get them, how many you have. Bring them in waves. You can never have enough. So I don't necessarily agree with that assessment. And you can make the argument too of like, well, if you take a defensive tackle, you're punting on Carl Brooks and Devontae Wyatt, too. So I don't see it that way. Go get pass rushers, and you're going to normally be in a pretty good spot. Perhaps our expectations of Reed Wicks going into the season were too high, but they did also not get to where they needed to be either, which isn't hidden. Agreed. I think it maybe was a little bit too high, but I think they were realistic at the same point. And either way, just didn't. Not only didn't you not see improvement, you saw stagnation and I think some steps in the wrong direction. Over your years of scouting college prospects, what trait have you learned to value the most? For example, I think the ability to play bigger than your size is very underrated for receivers. I do think size and strength is undervalued. I think we all love to see like the flashy, like undersized defensive ends that win in a hurry, or the wide receivers that are a bit undersized and making plays. Man, size and strength matter. But the number one that I've learned is instincts at linebacker. Instincts at linebacker are king. If you don't have them, it is a almost impossible position to play. So it's great to get the 4.3 40 guys or whatever and get the supreme athletes, and you need some level of athleticism, but you have to have a good baseline of instincts at that position, or to me, it's just a non-starter. That's probably the number one lesson that I've learned at any position is instincts at linebacker. You better freaking have them. Wicks is an amazing route runner and gets open. If he fixes the drops, he's going to be a threat. The head office needs to install jugs and machines all over his house. He wakes up, balls coming at you. Love it. I'm all in. Just have to say, love chopping it up. Green Bay Packers on a Wednesday afternoon in the offseason. What a fan base thinks, Andy. RJ, that is beautifully said. I could not agree with you more. I cannot thank you all enough for this platform and this ability. It has me beaming ear to ear. Just like you said, Wednesday, February 12th, 2:47 p.m. on a snowy Green Bay day, just talking about the dumbest Packers shit you could possibly imagine. And it's just all freaking magical. So thank you guys. I appreciate it a ton. Kind of felt like we saw a good Jordan in that Brazil game, and then it went downhill with injuries. Do you agree? For the most part, yes. I think a couple of things you could have cleaned up in that Brazil game. There's still a very, very special player there in Jordan. And I do think injuries really affected him a lot, even just on lack of practice time, how he was mobile or lack thereof. I think it absolutely played a major factor last year. One of my Miami friends is desperate for Fields. All right, go for it. A Fields backup to Tua is not the worst idea in the world. Like, Tua is going to miss a handful of games. Like having Justin Fields there as somebody who can be, a break glass in case of emergency. But I don't think Fields fits in that Mike McDaniel offense very well at all. So I would probably stay well away from that. Pessimistically, Matt LaFleur needs to stop apologizing about calling bad plays every game and just stop calling bad plays. Yeah, I'm all for it. Call the good plays. That is my philosophy as well. Single digits over here in the Colorado mountains. Yeah, we're getting some snow here, just a few flurries. Colder day in Green Bay area, but nothing that's out of the realm of ordinary for February 12th. That's for sure. All right, guys, I got to get out of here. As I mentioned, in 12 minutes, I'm going to be chatting live on Bleacher Report. I'll tweet the links out on Twitter and on Blue Sky. So if you're on either, you can check that out. And I'll be chatting 3 p.m. to 3:30. It's open Q&A. So if you guys want to ask questions over there, I'll be there, open to anyone, everyone. So I will see you guys in just a bit at about 3 p.m. on Bleacher Report. But thank you so much for being here. I'll be back here again next week for the Q&A, probably on Wednesday, but I'll keep you posted. And then Friday, happy hour, 3 p.m. Central Time this week as well. So I'll see you guys there for that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.